Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Hecht, Communications Director of Freedom Institute. Welcome to the first of several webinars we have in our Process Addictions Initiative in the month of September. We are delighted to have Tian Dayton, PhD, joining us for our first ever webinar. Thanks for joining us, Tian.
Delighted to be here, Catherine.
Delighted to have you. Tian is going to be using material from her new book, the ACoA Syndrome, which was published last week through Health Communications and is available anywhere books are sold. She will be utilizing material from this book and speaking from her experience as well on process addictions or self-medication and how the two relate. So Tian, without further ado, take us away.
Okay, so we're talking about process addictions and the ACoA trauma syndrome. So what is the ACoA trauma syndrome? It is a post-traumatic stress syndrome in which unresolved childhood pain is surfacing in adulthood. What we mean by that is that pain which has gone not dormant necessarily, but has never really been understood and figured out because of the nature of the child mind and the way we process traumatic material, or rather don't process traumatic material, and it gets sort of stored in an unconscious state within us, gets triggered in adulthood and how it gets played out. Now, because this is relationship pain, the kind of trauma I deal with is generally a one-time disaster or a one-time occurrence that you can kind of put into perspective and get past. It is the cumulative effect of growing up with abuse, neglect, addiction, dysfunction, week after week after week throughout the developmental cycle. And because the trauma is generally caused by the people we depend on and love in relationship, it tends to be triggered and resurfaced when we again enter deep, committed, caring, intimate relationships. It's the love, the dependency, the vulnerability we feel when we fall in love or when we have children triggers what happened in our childhood when we were feeling loving, vulnerable, and dependent. Now, the first responders, to just give you a sense of why the body bumps up this kind of pain, we're more PTSD prone than people who are more distant from ground zero. People at ground zero and smelled, heard, saw, felt, and even tasted. There is an acrid taste in the air for a couple of weeks. The trauma occurring around them. The senses absorb the more highly emotional a situation, and the more senses involved, the more the brain and the body remember and store it, but without necessarily thought. The family is a highly sensorial world. The home is a sensorial environment. We see people in our home. We see our home. We see and hear and taste and smell our homes. We touch our homes. Our relationships with our parents and family and our home are filled to the brim with sensorial input. And what happens that's highly emotional, and of course it's emotional, these are the people we care most in the world about, this is our family, get remembered the most powerfully by the brain and body. So, just some statistics, 50% of ACoAs marry alcoholics, 70% of ACoAs develop patterns of self-medication. That can include drugs, alcohol, food, sex, work, gambling, spending. Compulsive relationship with any of these activities constitutes a process addiction. ACoAs are 4 times more likely to become alcoholics than the general population. 55% of all family violence occurs in alcoholic homes. Incest is twice as likely among daughters and sons of alcoholics. Alcohol is a factor in 90% of all child abuse cases. And keep in mind, these statistics are those that have been reported and tallied. That means people have come forward and talked about it. there are millions of people who don't. Self-medication, as we said, it's a compulsive relationship with food, sex, money, work, exercise. It can be a compulsive relationship with control. I mean, there's a mind-body component to self-medication. We're getting addicted to a behavior that's making us feel better and helping us reduce a feeling of inner chaos, and also releasing dopamine or a feel-good chemical into our bloodstreams. Or white flour and sugar, sexual orgasm. These are activities that release dopamine and get adrenaline going, which is also self-stimulating and can be very addictive to the brain. So that's the self-medicating cycle. It takes hold when we compulsively use a substance or behavior to manage and control moods and mental states that we cannot manage on our own, or we think we can't manage our own, or we think that the feelings, we don't want to feel the intense feelings we're feeling because we think we can't survive them. Why do we think we can't survive them? Usually because that's how it felt to us as kids. Those feelings felt unsurvivable in those very important relationships. And it maybe was a matter of survival as a child. We thought if I let myself know how bad I feel, I'd want to run and hide and never come back here. So I'll find a way to live with this and feel less bad all the time. Little kids discover ice cream, candy, and then it moves into beer, and then it moves into alcohol, drugs, pot. That's this. The self-medicating can start very young. So we feel anxious, depressed, lost. We feel super needy. We feel confused, and we find a way out of it. We hit upon a behavior that makes those feelings go away. And then we engage in that behavior because we feel better, or we feel good, we feel high, we feel that all is okay, expansive feeling. But because these behaviors make us, overweight, in trouble, maybe, debting, because these feelings cause complications, we also have some bad feelings when the pain we're trying to medicate resurfaces. We feel shame, regret, more anxiety, more depression, more fear, more panic. Now we've got not only the old pain we were medicating, we have a bunch of newly created pain that's causing us problems. So we get caught in this need for more self-medication to treat this ever-expanding well of pain. And then we do what we do. We take drugs. We overeat. We get sexually in trouble, and then we feel anxious and depressed again. So we self-medicate. And that's the wheel of self-medication.
Tian, let me ask you a question about that really quickly. Do you see in ACoAs who have become alcoholic that these process addictions are more apt to come up after sobriety, or does it usually come up all at once? How do they get separated or teased out in somebody who's become an alcoholic or a drug addict as well?
It's a good question, and it's a rampant issue. I'm sure that's probably why you're doing this series.
Right.
What happens when people put down the booze and the drugs, and then they pick up the food, the sex, the smoking, the gambling, the money spending or debting? That's a very common thing that we didn't even a clue to until the last decade or two in the field. We just were so focused on getting the alcoholic sober that we forgot about all the other things, all the other ways to self-medicate. And the reason we know about them now is because we get the brain chemistry of, say, eating or sexual acting out. The adrenaline is as addictive to the brain as heroin. But
Wow.
dopamine is released in sex. Dopamine is released in food, particularly white flour and sugar. And that's why people zone out with, food, because it really does make us feel better. It works. And so when people get sober, they're removing their primary medicator, which is fantastic. But there is that period where you're white knuckling it, or hopefully you're in good recovery so you won't white knuckle it, but anybody is vulnerable to feeling the emotional pain they were medicating or the emotional pain they've gathered up through their addiction. And that's when they grab the next thing that makes them feel good. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. It just
Yes.
interestingly enough, we just published a story today about a man in sex addiction. As he became clean from drugs and alcohol, it was like putting down his primary medication, and the sex addiction kicked in even more forcefully.
Yeah,
So,
because there's even more to medicate. The pain is up and the medicator is gone.
right.
And these are, as we're saying, these are powerful medicators, sex, food, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Okay. So, did you have another question or comment?
That's it for now. Please continue.
Okay. So, trauma in the childhood home contributes to the ACoA syndrome. When it is the parent causing the stress, it becomes a double whammy for the child because the parent is the person the child normally goes to for emotional regulation, to, the classic, the story of the mother who's standing in a grocery line rocking a bag of potatoes or flour because she's so used to rocking her baby. The reason we're used to rocking our babies is because we are their external regulator. They don't have the capacity to bring themselves into a calm state on their own. We as parents act as their external regulator. We also help them make sense of confusing situations. We put it in that sweet child talk, that sweetheart, we have special voices, that seems scary, but everything's fine. So we're the person the child goes to feel better. When we're the ones causing the stress as parents, that's a double bind for the child. Because the pain and defenses surrounding childhood trauma become part of the personality structure of the developing child. As children grow up, we all develop defenses against feeling pain. The younger those defenses are developed, the more serious they are and the more complicated they are and the more unconscious they are, because we didn't even know we were doing it at the time. We just learn how to ward off pain. Denial, splitting is an early defense, making something just getting it out of consciousness.
Splitting
Dissociating
mean.
is a young defense. Your body stays. Well, in dissociation, if you picture a little child and a parent, screaming at them, they can't, we'll get into the fight or flee in a few slides, but basically that child's trapped. Well, here we go, that child's trapped, and whether or not escape is possible, if they picture the child that is trapped in the home, the parent is big, they are small. The parent holds the keys to the car, the house, the refrigerator, the bank account. The parent runs the show. The child's completely dependent upon that parent for survival, or certainly for, as they get older, for a place to live, for, a home. But initially, it is their survival. The child is, let's see if we skipped. The child is making sense of the situation through immature reasoning. Children think with the developmental equipment that they have at any given age. And the young child makes sense of pain and trauma through child eyes. My daddy's yelling at me because I'm bad, I can't get anything right, I'm stupid, or maybe because I'm special. Maybe mommy or daddy are just wanting me to be the best person I can be, and that's why they're screaming at me. Children don't know how to make sense of this, so they use their immature reasoning to make sense of it. And that immature reasoning, the conclusions they come to, become part of the developing self. They become core beliefs inside the child that they carry into adolescence, adulthood. They take them to school. They take them into their friend relationships. They take them into their marriages and their own parenting. The trauma is cumulative. We touched on that earlier. We're not talking about a one-time event here. We are talking about neglect or abuse or hurt that happens within the home, and that creates a wound that doesn't get a chance to heal when it's cumulative. It's a wound that keeps getting pressed and pounded. We also create this distorted thinking around unresolved pain. We give ourselves reasons for why we're hurting so much, and some of those reasons are good and some are distorted. There's a helplessness that children feel. When children feel they can do nothing to improve their situation in life, they can collapse, they can give up, and underneath that collapse, there's a simmering kind of a rage that happens. So that can translate into a kind of a learned helplessness as we moved into adolescence and adulthood. Children have a sense that there's nothing they can do about their situation, so why try? And they carry that belief throughout their life. That's where, treatment for young children, programs, places that they get empowered or have some sense of a reality check that they aren't the problem, are so helpful to children at this age.
Tian,
Touched on that.
may I ask you another question? On that previous slide, you mentioned PTSD. Is this something that's new in the field, or has this been something that you have been that you found long ago, and that other people are only now picking up? Because I feel like I hadn't read a lot about PTSD with trauma in addicts until recently.
The reason you're hearing so much about it now is because SAMHSA, which is a government agency that funds research and addiction facilities and so forth, has now understood that trauma is real, that it's a mind-body phenomenon, and that if you don't treat the trauma, relapse is more likely.
Okay.
We're still trying to understand what happens to family members. There's so much emphasis on the alcoholic and their trauma. But I write about children growing up in this environment because they become so traumatized. And, let's face it, the alcoholic can sober up. But if you're a child in this world, you're growing up with all of this, and it's not because you're self-medicating. You did not create these problems for yourself, and you can't say, that was me and my disease. But we, as ACoAs, need to understand, too, that we have a disease, and we need to treat it as aggressively as someone would treat their addiction, because our disease is PTSD. And PTSD is it's a lot of research since Vietnam has slowly brought PTSD into the light. And I would say it was in the 80s when we in the field started saying, wait a minute, these veterans are talking about having the same symptoms that I see in my clients.
Wow.
Hypervigilance, we'll talk about those later, but the symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, depression, anger are very similar in soldiers and children of alcoholics. And it took, I would say, about 20 years to become part of the vernacular in the field. When I started hearing, understanding trauma and speaking on it, people were much less hesitant to accept it because they didn't understand the cumulative nature of it. And they didn't understand, and many of it, we didn't understand until more neurobiology research came out that it's because of the way we experience trauma that we have problems. The same situation can be experienced by two different people, and one will be traumatized by it and one may not. So I'm going over some of the factors that make it more traumatizing when you're trapped. when it's the parents causing the trauma, when there aren't buffers. Buffers are a huge part of creating resilience for children. If there are grandparents to go to, if there's a stable school, if you're in a neighborhood and you can spend time at the neighbor's house, resilient kids learn how to access and use their environments to buffer the pain. And if people listening to this can think back on the buffers in their own lives. Was it a neighbor? Was it a friend? Was it school? Was it their interest in theater and in sports? What buffers help them keep this kind of pain at bay, or help just get them out of the house, or give them models of different ways to be? So that's the long answer. The short answer is research in neurobiology, research in attachment, and research on trauma has been a burgeoning body for 20 years. The same sort of phenomenon was once called shell shock. It's now seen as a post-traumatic stress disorder, and the salient feature of this, and that's so core to understanding the ACoA syndrome, is that trauma experienced in childhood can lie dormant for days, years, decades. Where does that pain come from? Why can't we just feel of it, make sense of it, and let it go? What makes childhood pain so sticky and lasts so long inside of us? So here's the attachment part. Nurture only partially hardwires children for emotional regulation. I mean, nature only partially hardwires the children. Nurture completes the job. That means that each tiny interaction between parent and child actually builds neurological wiring within that child. So a child who has, that's why schedules are so important for kids. That's why stability in parents is so important, stability in routine, because that child is actually laying down neurological wiring pulled in from the environment and from the caretakers. We touched on children making sense. Children are born with a fully functioning amygdala, which means they're capable of a full-blown stress response. Children who are in their parents' arm and hear a door slam flail, their arms toss, their legs go. They're feeling a full stress response. They can feel a full pain response. Things that happen to children without medication, operations, and stuff like that. That when people say babies can't feel it, they're capable of a full pain, full stress response. But the part of the brain that reads the environment, that understands that was a door slamming, and I don't need to worry about that, it's not a shot that could get me in trouble, is not fully developed or not on board till age 4. So a child does not know what's stressing them or how stressed to be. They are completely dependent upon that parent to make sense of it for them. Also, and this is a big important piece in understanding the effect of trauma, the prefrontal cortex, which is where we make mature sense. It's the logical thinking, reasoning, long-term planning part of the brain. That doesn't develop till around 11 or 12. Now, I'm not telling any parent listening to this anything they haven't observed. Children suddenly, around that age, they start thinking differently. They have an ability to abstract, to hold two thoughts at the same time, to actually think about something. There's still a lot of brain changes coming in adolescence that, fair enough, make it seem as if they don't have that capacity, but they, 11 or 12 is when the prefrontal cortex starts coming on board. It continues to come on board until the early 20s, and more is being learned all the time.
Tian, I'm curious about the picture you used in this slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the baby on the father's chest, and he's playing a video game. Is that more of a comment on how? I mean, do you feel like the infant would then sense his stress playing the video game if he gets involved? Is that the point?
To me, I don't know. To me, he looks like a stressed out dad. I mean, I know when I had, when I raised children when dads weren't at home to the extent that they are now, but they were beginning to be at home with kids. And I knew that a dad was as tired as I was when I saw a dad with a little child in the park, and he was just sort of sitting there, connected to the child, and tossing a ball, and the little child would run and pick it up and bring it back, and he'd say, great, he'd toss it again. And I thought, he's figured out a game that lets him stay put and get a little breath, but he's still with that child.
Right. Okay.
Now, playing the video game, probably it wasn't the best choice of pictures. You're right. But, you know, mom to mom, if we're with our children all the time, I always thought with my own kids that one of the beauties of being with them is that they knew I was in the other room. Children can hear you breathe. If you're in another room humming to yourself and they're in another room humming to themselves, that can be a very companionable moment. And then they come in and you're making dinner, and I'd figure out a way to include them, and they can have a plastic knife and chop bananas, and there are a lot of ways to bring your children into daily activities. And through that, I really felt that my kids learned a cycle of how we relax together, how we as a mom and a child find our quiet moments. My kids watch very little TV, but when they did watch it, I would sit down with them and watch it, and that was a little break for both of us. It would be Sesame Street or something, and we both had fun. We both took a break. When they got older, I remember thinking, gosh, I don't like watching cartoons anymore, but I was so a part of their mind when they were little that I think I enjoyed them as much as they did. There is something about time that cannot be replaced. And this concept of I'm going offline here, but it's something I feel strongly about. Quality time was a big concept when I was raising the kids. And, I really thought, I'm not sure what I think of this, because in New York, the moms in the park had an expression, we called it schlock time, That's important too. And I think right now I'm describing a slide that probably wasn't a good choice, but it brings a lot to mind, because that dad is distracting himself, and maybe he shouldn't be playing that video game, but the child is sound asleep on the father's chest, feeling his respiration. I mean, look at that baby. If you want
Yeah, totally relaxed.
to know about a peaceful place to lie, that child has his head on his father's heart. That child's little hands are relaxed and touching him. He's smelling his father. He is hearing his breathing. He's sensing his breathing. And he is developing neurological wiring that's regulating. So it's a controversial slide. I think if I thought more about it, I might have chosen another one. But in truth, I've spent plenty of time on that when I was a mom too. Just being with my kids, doing things. And it's in all of our hearts, and they never forget it, and I never forgot it. And I'll tell you, one more aside is, when you do need to let your kids go, when they get older, and then perfectly well that part of good parenting is fostering their autonomy, it's a whole lot easier to let go if you've had enough of this, both as a child and a parent. But I'll tell you, as a mother, I was able to let go because I really had them, and I knew that. And it lives inside of both people, and they come back, and you come back. So, moving right along.
Yes, thank you.
Move? When we are terrified, there's a fight, flight, freeze. Now, this is at the core of the trauma response. This is in animals, it's in people, it's in reptiles, it's your cat, it's your dog, it's our prefrontal cortex when we're in a very high fear state. Now, that's whether you're a deer in the headlights, or a child being yelled at, or a child being neglected. The prefrontal cortex shuts down. That's our thinking brain shuts down. Our language shuts down because that's part of the prefrontal cortex too. The limbic system, on the other hand, the limbic system that engages our fear response and gets us, without thinking, to run to safety or to stand and fight, is in full gear. We are flooded with increased blood and adrenaline so that we can run on a dime. We need that response, and we need the thinking mind to shut down so that we don't think about fleeing for safety or standing and fighting and defending ourselves. Nature kept that thinking offline so we could get out in time. We don't want to think about whether we should run from an oncoming car. We just need to run. Or somebody needs to run and grab us without thinking much about it. Now, picture the child in the alcoholic home. If they cannot fight or flee, it's human to freeze. It's also animal to freeze. The freeze state is one of self-preservation. Picture your cat, picture your dog, picture a deer in the woods, and picture a child. Now, the thing about that freeze state is you don't see it. All you see is a quiet child. Sometimes you just see a well-behaved child. But what you're also maybe seeing, and this, if you're seeing the freeze, you maybe are seeing this too, is a dissociated child, which means that childs figure out how to stand there and take it, to tolerate it, to stay in the situation, because after all, where are they going to go? But on the inside, they're gone. They're not there. They're there in body, but not in mind or spirit. When they spend a long time in that freeze state, repeatedly, that makes PTSD more likely later. And that's where this ACoA syndrome comes in. We don't know that we don't know. We get scared again as adults. Maybe we hear yelling in the next room. Maybe we're yelled at by a partner. Maybe even it's our kids throwing a tantrum. And we just freeze in our tracks. We don't know what to deal. Our thinking's gone, and we don't know what to do about it, but we don't know that we don't know what to do about it. And then we think that what triggered the pain is what's causing the pain. And that's the core of the ACoA trauma syndrome as well, that we then think the person we're in a fight with is the total reason for our feeling so bad. And we're completely out of touch with the wound we're importing into our adulthood that is making us over-respond to what's going on in the present. That's a lot of explanation, but we'll go through it. Fight, flight, freeze, there we are. All the things we talked about, what happens in the body. We go on sensory overload, and we want to block what we're experiencing. We don't want to feel as bad as we're feeling. So we dissociate, we get out of there any way we can. And sometimes we can only get out in our minds. Now this is, I do psychodrama, and Moreno, who developed psychodrama, has a wonderful saying, the body remembers, but the mind forgets. And the body remembers what the mind forgets. So we store these memories because they're sensorial in our bodies, but we never fully made sense of them, mature sense of them. So they live inside of us, kind of waiting to be triggered. They live inside us as an emotional wound that we don't fully comprehend. We don't understand the origins.
Tian, can you just take a quick
Out of
moment?
sight is not out of mind.
Tian, can you take a quick moment and tell us briefly what psychodrama is? There might be some people on with us today who actually...
It's a role-playing method. It's actually the parent of all role-playing methods. It's now used in, if you role-play in business, a difficult customer, in the legal system, you role-play, being cross-examined. It's also used in therapy. In other words, the reason it's so effective with treating trauma is because the language part of the brain shut down in a high fear state. it is very hard, and we'll talk about again this in a later slide. It's very hard to talk about what happened to you because you never really made sense of it to begin with. You were that kid with childthink. So you didn't really know what was scaring you. And you made all kinds of distorted meaning out of it anyway. But so when you're an adult and you get very scared, or when you get into trouble and you go into treatment and the therapist says, well, just tell me about what traumatized you, and you look at them blankly and you think, well, would that I could, but I don't really, it's not all that clear in my mind. So we really understand what hurt the most by what we're repeating in our lives. If you're having if you're creating the same relationship dynamics over and over and over, and they seem similar to the ones you grew up with, and you keep recreating them in every new relationship, the names change, but the pain stays the same, that sends up a red flag as to where your unresolved pain lies. So what we want ACoAs to do is back up when they're triggered. Don't just, jump into a fight or jump into a defensive mode. Wonder about what's going on the inside that's making your reaction to something in the present so very intense. Does that clear up the psychodrama and the trigger stuff?
Yeah, I think so. We actually, Tian, I want to interrupt you for just a moment because as you start to get into the the treatment of it and how the model that you've developed, Todd F., who is a clinician from Lower Manhattan, wanted to know how early we start to see these things manifest in children.
That's a wonderful question because sometimes we don't. I mean, that ACoA is just as likely to be the over-functioning straight-A student, captain of the cheerleading squad, the football team, the track team, the teacher's pet, as they are the acting out kid. I think an interesting thing to look for is extremes. That's a part of what tells me as a clinician where people have been traumatized. Is somebody so good that they cannot stop overfunctioning, cannot stop being good, cannot stop seeking approval? Or are they so bad, are they so acting out and self-sabotaging that they just can't stop? If they can't balance, everybody's a little good and a little bad. If you can't balance that in your life, chances are you're stuck in an emotional extreme. So where does it show up if you've been traumatized? It can lie dormant because it's locked under what we'll talk about later, false self-functioning. You've adopted a self that's more acceptable to your family, that the family really likes, that the school people really like. And the design of the false self is to keep that pain hidden. So if you've got a great false self, your trauma might not show up until some life stressor happens. And suddenly you're flooded with a kind of pain that you can't manage. And you sort of don't know why. And it feels much more intense than is appropriate to the situation that's triggering it. Or it's just plain intense and you can't get through it. It can happen in adolescence. If the child's been traumatized over time, they might find adolescence a perfect place to act out. So it can come out in acting out negatively, or I don't know that you'd say acting out positively, but an inability to not make a mistake. So age-wise, it's a little tough to say. That's why it's a post-trauma reaction, because it doesn't necessarily accompany the trauma. It can be hidden for a long time. It's not safe to feel your feelings in an alcoholic family. A child who's hurt wants to process it right away. Children burst into tears and they want attention right away for what's bothering them, and they want to talk it through. Children who don't have a place to go with that, a safe place to go, learn to hide the pain. And it can stay hidden for as long as it stays hidden. So here are some of the triggers that can come later on that can trigger old memories that are unconscious, and they we feel blindsided. We just don't know where they came from. Sensorial cues. You know, if somebody's feels vulnerable and sick, or has some kind of illness or accident that makes them feel overly vulnerable, that other pain can surface because it's that feeling of helplessness is triggering an historical feeling of helplessness. Sensorial, environmental cues, loud noises, smells, right? Smells take you right back. The olfactory system is a very old system, and it triggers, it's based in the brain, and it triggers memories very powerfully, as does music. Weather. And then there are other subtle cues. The ACoA, you know, the battleground for the ACoA is the living room, the home. So raised voices, scary eyes, darting eyes, angry eyes, sudden movements can trigger fear-related memories from childhood in an adult. And this happens when people enter group and treatment. They can feel so mistrustful, and it's very understandable given the history. And especially if you're in treatment from addiction, you remove the medicator, and there you are in treatment, and there are all these feelings coming out of you, and you want a reason for them that you can see with your eyes. It's baffling to think this pain is just burbling out of me, and from where and why. You want to say you're causing it, this is causing it. You want a reason that you can see, but some of the reasons are historical. Relational cues, feeling vulnerable, dependent, power imbalance, a marriage, child rearing can bring these feelings back from childhood. You know, when we're in more control of our lives, our vulnerability can stay a little more patted down under the emotional earth of our beings. But fall in love and woo, first of all the beautiful feelings get triggered. You feel that warmth of childhood, the spontaneity, the creativity, the fun, and then you feel vulnerability. What if I get left? What if I don't like feeling this needy, and all that kind of thing. Now, normal is to say, wow, I really feel worried that, you know, I'm feeling dependent on you. You could leave. Can we talk about it? How serious are you? I'm feeling pretty serious. Or, I really love this fun I'm having with you. I mean, do you love it too? Is this something you want to have more of? Those are ways of talking about that. But ACOAs may not have learned how to talk in those ways, how to think and feel at the same time and reflect, because they have a pattern of hiding their feelings from themselves. I mean, as well as from their environment, but eventually you're hiding it from yourself because it's too threatening to feel it. It hurts to feel it, and you've learned that you can't do anything about it anyway, so you might as well just repress it, try to get rid of it. But, you know, out of sight is not out of mind and body. Seasonal cues, the time of day can be a trigger, month, year, holidays. They can trigger anxiety, depression. So the limbic system, it's important to understand that body picture. That's the limbic system, is the brain and body. It's our unconscious system that lets us do everything from tie our shoes to breathe to some of the it has jurisdiction over eating, sleep cycles, libido, appetite, mood, even bonding. So our limbic system is in charge of all of these functions that are not only inside of us, but they're part of our, remember back to the relationship. The limbic system is wired and developed in concert with our caretakers and our environment. So it doesn't just govern what goes on inside of our bodies as we stand alone. It governs what we don't see in this relationship arena. Trauma can dysregulate the limbic system. I like to say we go to 0 to 10, 10 to 0 with no speed bumps in between. We develop this pattern of going from shut down, no feeling, I don't feel anything, I'm numb. That's a very typical response to feeling overwhelmed, just shutting it down, and then it gets triggered and we feel overwhelmed. So we as children felt overwhelmed with too much emotion. We shut it down. We dissociated it. As adults, when we get triggered with too much emotion, we want to shut it down. Or we're a little bit shut down around certain wounds, and they get triggered, and they go from 0 to 10. Our anger goes zoop. We go from no anger to serious anger. We go from no kind of pain and tears and so forth to tons. We just go from 0 to 10. We have trouble regulating our moods and regulating our emotions. We live in emotional extremes rather than a psychological balance and integration. Trauma can make us feel fragmented on the inside because of this. We have these pieces of memory floating around. We have take a person, when I work with someone, for example, I'm thinking of a case who was sexually abused. She didn't remember that. She had been too out of body at the time, so she couldn't really recollect the experience, but she recollected the triggers. When she'd be around sexual situations, she'd get very anxious on the inside. She didn't want to have a relationship that involved much sexual touching or encountering, unless it was just sort of anonymous sex. That was easier, but not that in between. But she did remember things like dark, grass on her back, the sounds of voices. So we absorb the sensorial information, but because our thinking is shut down, we don't weave it together into a coherent picture. We don't say, I'm really feeling threatened, I'm being led into the woods, and I'm scared, and I'm, something bad is going to happen. We just leave our bodies and something bad happens, and we have fragments of the experience that get triggered when we get into that fear-terror state. But still, we don't know what's going on. Now, for the child in an alcoholic home, it's a similar sort of process. They may they'll get triggered, say, by this entering another partnership or parenting and feeling vulnerable and feeling deep feeling so much love in addition to the caring, the protectiveness. But the fear gets triggered too. And they don't remember what's associated with the love previously. They just think, I look at my child, why do I have this mixture of feelings? I know I adore them. I know I adore my partner, but why do I feel scared, anxious, shaking, hypervigilant? Why am I waiting for something bad to happen all the time? Why am I so scared? Now, it's confusing because any parent is scared something's going to happen to their child, and any partner is scared that something's going to happen to their beloved. So it's hard to know when that crosses a line from normal fear to the kind that it becomes a post-trauma stress reaction. But if you can't shake it, you can't talk it out, you can't name it and articulate it, chances are there's some of it that got sucked into the emotional mind and body before, without language, without understanding, without reflection. So you don't know that you don't know. Shattered dreams. Trauma does that. It shatters a sense of a future. It shatters a sense of a safe, orderly universe, a predictable universe. So it becomes a sort of an invisible syndrome, where as ACoA is black and blue on the inside, but we don't really know it because we have spent so much time distancing ourselves from our own pain. Now, some of the characteristics, these are some of the top ones I've been developing this list for, it's probably about 15 years now, and I bring some things more depending on how it's based on research that's out in the field of Bessel van der Kolk, Henry Crystal. It's trauma literature that's out there, and some of my own clinical experiencing. But this is a list of the ones I see the most, and people diagnose the most. Problems with self-regulation. Numbing of responsiveness. This is PTSD, the qualities of PTSD. Hypervigilance. Think of codependency. Hypervigilance at the core of it. We look to feel, we want to know what we're feeling by reading what somebody else is feeling on their face. We decide what we're feeling after we decide what the smart thing is to feel in the situation. And then we feel that. We're hypervigilant. We're waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're waiting for something surprising to happen. We don't even have to say bad, just something different. Somatic disturbances. Remember, PTSD is a mind-body phenomenon, and a lot of people don't know what they're feeling until their body shouts at them or tells them something. I'm queasy in my stomach. I'm tense in my shoulders. My breath is getting short. Gee, am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling scared? Am I feeling something? Do I need to breathe and reflect on and ask myself some of those questions and give myself a little time for feelings to arise that I can then, as an adult, now that I'm so much safer and I know I can keep myself safe, can I translate these feelings I'm having into words if I really let myself have them? But of course, for the ACoA, that's a long distance between allowing ourselves to feel them, let ourselves have them, and feel them long enough to translate them into words. Meditation helps ACoAs a lot, in addition to therapy. Learning, because you're taught to sit through your emotions. And pretty soon you learn that you can survive your own feelings. And as you feel them, words come to you. Pieces of the picture fall into place. People have this experience in therapy all the time. In group therapy, at hearing and identifying with other people, in 12-step rooms, feelings start to well up. And as adults, where we're comfortable, we know in a 12-step room we're pretty safe. Nobody's going to jump on us, tell us to leave, etc. So we can sit there and feel what's coming up, and then maybe raise our hands and translate some of it into words, or maybe just in our heads translate into words, and pieces start to fall into place. Intrusive re-experiencing is a quality of PTSD. Learning difficulties. You have to attend to learn. You have to be able to be calm enough to be with the subject you're listening to. And if your thinking is sort of frozen, and if your body is anxious, it's very hard to just breathe and listen and not be scared and take in the material and think about it, which is what you need to do to learn. Aggression against self and others, very commonly seen in people with PTSD. Bessa Vanderkolk talks about all of these. Intrusive re-experiencing. We're interrupted by disturbing feelings and we don't know quite where they came from. Somatic, I mean their body, their mind, they're maybe in our sleep, dreams. Learned helplessness we talked about. Memory disturbances and dissociations we've talked about. And then, of course, there's this desire to self-medicate, that's the trauma addiction connection. Is what can I do to make these icky, yucky, lousy feelings go away? Alcohol works great, it works beautifully, drugs like a charm, etc., until they don't work, until they create more bad feelings. And then we're locked in that cycle of self-medication.
Tian, the last thing I want to do is rush you, but I do want to point out that it's a few minutes before 2, and I want to give time for the end of your presentation where you talk about, you have the opportunity to tell us a little bit about the book and the model you've developed.
Okay, so here's the list of qualities that I find over time are most identified with. Hypervigilance, avoidance. We isolate, we avoid going towards subjects that we don't want to touch on. Unresolved grief, loss of trust and faith, and this will be posted so that people can look at these lists in their own time. Emotional constriction, not wanting to feel too much. Problems with self-regulation we talked about, shame, easily triggered, and distorted reasoning. So we have gone through those. And then the positive characteristics. This is not all a sad story. We become creative, self-reliant, sensitive, funny people. We're funny people, ACOAs. We have great humor honed to a fine art. We often have great problem-solving skills, inner strength. ACOAs that I pulled identified with these as the top 10. Can-do attitude. Nobody else is going to do it, so I'm going to do it. If I can't rely on anybody, I'm going to rely on myself, and I'm going to figure this out. We can have people skills, creativity, humility, and a willingness to change. So we've gone over these and pretty much in our talk. So why is experiential therapy so important? And this is what I talk about in the ACoA trauma syndrome and in a model I developed called relationship trauma repair. And relationshiptraumarepair.com, and the ACoA trauma syndrome is, Amazon, everywhere books are sold. Experiential therapy, because we never learn to talk about experience, we don't know how to talk about what hurt. So we need this, I like sociometry for my model the best, because psychodrama really requires a lot of training for a clinician to do it sensitively. Sociometry is a group method that is all about getting up and out of our seats, asking questions, putting them on a graph on the floor. Go to 100, ask a question. This is, that represents 0, this is 100. There's a line along this floor. Walk to the point on the floor that best describes how comfortable you are in this group at this moment. Go to a timeline. What age do you feel you're carrying some pain around? It just gets you up and out of your seat. And the beauty of it, if you look at those pictures, is people are standing there talking to each other. Who's standing next to you on the timeline? Who's standing next to you on the feeling floor check? Who else is feeling shame? Who else is feeling anger? Talk to each other. Share about it. This opens up pockets of self. And we find it easier to talk in these small little dyads, triads, and clusters, perhaps than we do with a direct question. And because we hear and we sense what other people are feeling, we get a little more comfortable feeling our own feelings, and we feel supported. Somebody is saying, kind of feeling what we're feeling. It's a reality check. It's normalizing. Journaling is a beautiful, right at the end of your hand is a pen and a piece of paper. And as you write, your thinking mind starts to come on board, and your feelings get translated into words. And pretty soon, you look back on what you've written and you think, oh, that was what I was feeling. So this is a wonderful healing process that you can do any old time, and it gets it gets serotonin, which is it's like an antidepressant going into your bloodstream. So these are, get some activities going that get positive brain and body chemicals going, like exercising, like journaling, like guided imagery is here as well. Guided imagery, you listen to calming music and voices leading you through a process of processing feeling or anger or so forth. They bring in emotional regulation. You regulate the feeling because you come to understand it. First of all, you allow yourself to feel it, and then you translate it into words, and you breathe through it. Breathe, breathe, breathe. So healing is about all these things. We're talking about integration, creating new understanding, and creating a new body to live in and to love in. A calmer, more regulated body. Talked about. And there, okay, there we go. And that's back on this book. So are we almost at time, or are there any questions?
We do. Tian, we have one question. Angie R., who looks like she's in Philly, I think. Yes, she's from Philadelphia. She's actually asking about the training and how she could be in touch with you, or if you do travel, if you do online trainings for the model that you just described?
That I will be doing more in. At the moment I'm doing them kind of, I was in Cape Cod last weekend, and I'll be in Scottsdale and Salt Lake City next month, and but I think I'll do also some New York trainings in the coming years. So I'd say log on to it. Emotionexplorer.com is where my blog is, emotionexplorer.com. And that's also an interactive creative self-help website that will take you through all these processes. I mean, you can journal your feelings, you can use creative exercises. It's a feeling floor check online. I've translated a lot of what I try to help people with for healing into an online process. So on emotionexplorer.com, if you click on the blog, you can sign up for a mailing list and alerts, and I will post trainings on that.
Thank you, Tian. To all of the people joining us, thank you so much for sharing your afternoon hour with us. This was our first of several webinars in the Process Addictions Initiative, and we're just thrilled that Tian was our quote-unquote guinea pig. And Tian, thank you so much for joining us. If anybody has any additional questions, please send them to me, and I will make sure they get to Tian. And again, if you are here to get the hour of continuing education training, also email me and we'll get you hooked up with a certificate of completion. So Tian, thank you again. And we will have the recording of this webinar up in the coming days on the website for further viewing. So good luck with the book, and thanks for everything. We really appreciate your friendship and professionalism here at Freedom.
Feeling is completely mutual. Thank you.
Great. Goodbye, everybody.